Okie dokie.
Yep.
Okay, so today's guest is someone that I've had on the show before back in March. So he was on episode 2 where he talks about the relationship of the gut microbiome as well as, the gut microbiome and exercise as well as the new, the coronavirus pandemic. And he's currently a PhD candidate at Yokohama City University specializing in viruses. He also has an MD degree from Christian Medical College Vellore in India. He's intelligent, he's fun, interesting sense of humor, a little bit weird. Jeremiah Stanley, thank you for being on the show again.
Thank you.
Okay, because I remember back in, I think it was February when the whole, the coronavirus became known to the public, and I saw you at the gym, and then we were talking about it, and you're like, oh, I'm so sick of people asking me about the coronavirus, right?
Imagine it's like 6 months and people are still asking me.
Yeah, how is that? I know that you're not getting a lot of sleep, you're very busy with everything. How is the whole research going?
Yeah, we're still trying to figure out, and it's still trying to figure out the same questions asked. And
right.
Our kind of knowledge is growing slowly, but slow and steadily.
Right.
So we were still in a better position than what we were 6 months back. We know more about the virus, but we still got a long way to go.
Right. Are you getting sick of people asking you about the updates of the virus? Or are you pretty used to that? What do you answer to everyone? Because obviously you can't explain everything from the start,
So when I meet new people, I just don't talk about my job.
Right.
But I can't escape from the from the old people.
Right.
So so it's almost every day I have some notifications asking questions, some serious questions, like my family is affected with COVID, or my relatives, what's the problem? Can you help me out?
Yeah.
And things like that, and people moving out in quarantine, they ask some doubts. So it's my inbox is kind of flooded with so many questions, and for this I'm really sorry that we still don't have the clear picture. So science is just working its way through, but so whatever knowledge that we have right now, I kind of give them and support them.
Yeah, because it's only been a few months, and all the research, everybody's speeding to get research done and getting new information out, and something like a new virus like this usually takes years and years to complete these kind of research, right? So it's...
And the other problem that I'm facing is the accumulation of research papers. So it's every day there is at least 100 to 150 papers published.
Wow.
New papers about COVID.
Right.
So keeping track of that and following that is really difficult. If I just don't keep track of it for 1 week, if I'm stuck with my if I'm stuck with my experiments, so I don't read the literature, and it's I fall back,
Yeah, definitely. You always have to keep updated, but
exactly. So I'm not sure if I'm updated for this show yet.
It's fine. I'm just happy to having a chat with wine and everything like that. So, and also you just mentioned there's 100 papers, 100 to 150 papers coming out every day.
Exactly.
Right? There must be papers.
Someone should flatten that curve.
Too much. There must be studies though where you're this is not a valid experiment, or it's not a very reasonable way to go through an experiment, because everyone's doing it in a hurry, right? Everyone's under stress. Exactly. They have to get information out. There must be research where they're oh, this doesn't this shows nothing, or this is bullshit and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, it's actually the same problem with research. Take any research,
right.
There'll be some good papers, some papers which kind of force fitted their theory to so it takes if you understand the concepts, we kind of figure out which is good, which is bad, but here we're getting a huge volume of paper, so We got to study everything. I mean, are the most important ones, and then figure out which is good. Take the good things from the bad. That's another big issue, right?
Wow, that's a lot of work. Right? So how long do you spend like reading these papers? Because obviously you have to do the experiment and stuff like that, studies yourself.
Exactly.
As well as you have to be reading, up to date research. So you must be spending like a lot of time reading. Yeah.
Experiments. Like once we step into the experiment part, we have to design the experiments and make them perfect. There should not be any flaw. And when we are doing the experiment, we have to be like so precise, it's like even a microliter matters, so we should be really careful in doing that, apart from our protection. So we can't be thinking of anything else while doing the experiment. So we go inside the COVID lab. It's like 3 or 4 hours we just in there, and then come out of it, we are like kind of tired because of the concentration and focus, which is continuously for 3 hours, which we do the experiments. After that, it's like really tired. We don't feel like reading. Definitely. But then maybe maybe 1 day or 2 days a week, I ease out my experiments. And maybe dedicate that for reading.
Wow. So back maybe when we talked about this earlier on Barbell Radio, were you expecting this virus to be like a pandemic, like as big as it is now?
Exactly.
Like, were you expecting that back in February when we first talked?
Exactly. I was at that time, the knowledge that we had was this is a respiratory virus with a good rate, a high R0 or a high spreading rate.
Okay.
So this virus can spread easily. And last time we were talking about the high infectivity and not so much severity.
Right. Okay. Yes.
So maybe we were kind of predicting it right that time. So the virus is kind of spread everywhere, and it's not a big killer, but it's a killer just because of the number of people it infects.
Okay. It's wow, because I think you were saying mortality rate back then was 2 to 3%.
Exactly.
Can you still the same for now?
Yeah.
I know it depends on the country and where you are.
Yeah, it's somewhere between 1 to 6%.
1 to 6%.
Because we don't test everyone who's infected.
Right.
So we don't have an exact denominator to calculate the number.
Right.
How many people infected and how many people die out of the infected people. So we have a lot of asymptomatic people who don't get tested at all. So if you include that in the denominator, so the mortality rate
changes
goes down,
the story completely, right? I don't know how reliable that number is. Like, it's I don't know.
Yeah, but
changes the whole game.
Now, if you don't think about that, we can say like most of the infections, like more than 80% of the infections, they get cured without anything. You need not worry at all. And just maybe 2 to 5% of the infected people with other risk factors, like like diabetes or even like other like heart disease and these kind of obesity, age, and existing lung diseases. Those people are like more vulnerable.
What about back in India? How is that like? How are your family and your friends doing back in India?
Yeah, it's like walking on knife because India is not as disciplined as Japan.
Right. In what ways? Like
in Japan you get a rule. A government passes a rule. You guys have to wear masks. You have to have the social distancing, and people diligently follow it. But India, there are a few people who follow it, but majority of the people, the message they don't realize the seriousness of the message. It's a more crowded country.
Yeah.
I mean, where there are a lot of people there, so that's what I think India is doing good, but just because of the population and the level of intellect of each people and the way they perceive it, it's not doing good.
Did they have a lockdown?
There were many lockdowns, especially in my state.
Right.
And the lockdown is actually useful to kind of delay the war. There is a war which is going to happen. And if you do a lockdown, it's not like you're winning the war. The lockdown is just like you're buying time to prepare for the war.
Delaying. Okay.
So when you take out the lockdown, it's going to go up. So what are we using that time for? The government should use the time for strengthening up the infrastructure of the healthcare facilities, kind of give some holidays for the doctors and the healthcare workers who are like working, who are like kind of saturated. So things like that. I think there are planning.
But it's not just India doing the lockdown.
All over the world,
yeah.
The healthcare people are really overworked now, and sometimes even they are human, and they say they can't take it anymore, and if they quit it, and then it's like there's going to be total chaos.
Yeah.
So maybe the lockdown can be used to, kind of reduce the number of cases and reduce the burden on the healthcare facilities. But I think it's gone too far now, so we don't know.
How is the infrastructure of the medical like the hospitals and stuff like that in India? Are they very stable in that way? Or?
There is the primary healthcare is really good in certain states.
Yeah.
And I think the doctor-patient ratio is too bad in India just because of the population.
Right.
So we just can't, point our fingers on one bad thing. So it's a very big populated country. So there is always a recipe for disaster.
I just have this image that India has a lot of doctors, but I guess this is my guess. They go to the States or overseas to study, and then they end up staying there. So there are a lot of doctors coming from India, but they end up going overseas, so there doesn't end up being a lot of doctors in
Should I give this a pass?
Oh, okay.
No, there are a lot of doctors in India.
Yeah.
And it's maybe just 1 or 2% of the Indian doctors they're able to clear out and go into the US. So if I take 100 people in my university, in my batch, maybe 3 or 4 people have gone to the US. So maybe a maximum less than 5% go out. The remaining 95% they stay in India, and
so there are a lot of doctors, but there are a lot a people.
Yes, exactly.
So that's the answer.
What more do you expect from the second most populated country in the world?
That is true. And I think it's just very interesting what you mentioned about the difference of how we react to what the government is saying. We're in Japan and in India, a lot of Japanese people do follow the rules. Wear your mask, don't go outside. And Japanese people follow this. This is just my personal opinion, because a lot of people are scared to be ridiculed by others. We have this thing called mask police or jishuku police, which is quarantine police.
Okay.
And if people end up going outside, they get bashed, whether that's online or in person,
really?
And they're made to feel a certain way. So I wonder, do you think there's anything like that in India as well, or not really?
No, in India you don't need the masked police or whatever. There are police, and in lockdown, if some people come out, you really get bashed.
Oh, okay.
They
need to do that.
Yeah, so people going to buy the groceries or even whatever, the police just charge at them and bash them. So lockdown is the police and law are kind of working at their best to enforce the lockdown.
Right.
So we should give credit to them. But since, like it's a large population, and for example, in Japan, if it is a lockdown, there is always a combini nearby.
Yep.
So you need not worry about anything. You say government says a lockdown, the person can just be inside and just go to the combini for 5 minutes and get something, come back. But in India, it's not everybody has access to such facilities. There'll be like less number of stores for each person, for a group of people. So there will always be some rush. If a lockdown is announced the previous night, will be the hotspot of transmission. So there'll be like people crowding the supermarkets and the markets, and that's how it is.
I just think that even in Japan, the announcement of the lockdown, or whether that lockdown was they stopped the lockdown, it's very sudden, the announcement. Like it's either like a few days before where they're like, oh, we're not going to do a lockdown anymore, or a day before they're like, oh, we're going to do a lockdown now. I wish like just as a public, like a normal, like a general public, I wish that the government would plan a little bit ahead, but obviously this is not so, you being in a medical field and stuff like that.
But like unless they are like really absurd, they won't make these decisions without any planning. So there must be a good scientific team which would have said like, okay, the number of cases is like stable, you can release the lockdown. And there was a real good graphic which came out like a month or a couple of months, maybe a month ago, like the number of cases per day in different countries. And then we saw that the countries in which the people were wearing masks, like most of the people were wearing masks, the number of cases were kind of a plateau.
I saw that.
You saw that graph, right? Yeah, it's a real good graph. Maybe Japan, I'll give the credit to the Japanese people, because once they get a law or a rule that this, you should do this, people do that. People just follow. They wear the masks, and they keep social distancing, and they just don't complain that the masks are like suffocating me. Maybe that's why the number of cases are less, or even the Japanese government can boldly announce like, okay, we don't need a lockdown anymore.
Right. Well, I kind of understand people who does feel like that masks are suffocating, because we come, as a Japanese person, we come from a culture that wears masks, whether that be protection from cold, or you just don't want to show people your faces. Like that's where that's a lot of the time that's why Japanese people wear masks as well.
So that's I kind of figured out like the ancient culture where people wearing masks. I was imagining the samurais with masks. Okay, you're talking about the present.
So like we come from like a background where we wear masks on a daily basis, but for a lot of other people in other countries like the States, they think that masks are only worn in like a medical situation.
My respiration, my right.
It's like, oh, you're making me wear a mask. It means that I can't. There's no freedom of speech, or I can't talk or anything.
No, but at the end of the day, we have to follow science, right? So if you wear a mask, it's gonna protect you from the virus,
right?
You get a virus, it's like 80% chance you're going to be okay. So if you think it's your right, you take that 80% chance. And that's fine. I mean, but it's up to you. But it's your right. But you get infected, you might spread it to an old person in your neighborhood or in your house, and he or she has to suffer because you are so stuck up.
That's true. Yeah.
So I think Japan as a population, they kind of think about everybody around. Maybe in a cultural way too, it kind of helped Japan to slow down the spread.
I just, because with the vaccinations, they won't be coming out anytime soon.
My personal opinion?
Yeah.
No vaccine.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. You know what? This is exactly my personal view.
Yeah. Go ahead.
My kind of connecting the dots with the trend that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
So what I feel is like, if you take any other disease, say for example, you must have had a chicken pox or a mumps.
I actually never had chickenpox.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Those are like common diseases of the childhood.
Yeah.
Like maybe. Okay, so mumps or chicken pox are like usually they are vaccinated. Kids are vaccinated. Sometimes when the kids like in between the vaccine booster, sometimes the kid may develop the chicken pox. So if you get a chicken pox or mumps in the child,
mm-hmm.
it gives you a lifelong immunity.
Right.
So it's like you are kind of protect. It's called as an infection immunity. So infection immunity is one of the best kind of immunities that any person can get.
Mm-hmm.
A vaccine immunity may be equal to or lesser than.
What does that mean?
I mean, you get an immunity after vaccine.
Okay. Yeah.
It's not as good as the infection immunity.
Right. Okay.
So that's this entirely my view. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it can be the vaccine after you get a vaccine, the immunity can be same as infection immunity,
mm-hmm.
or slightly lesser than infection immunity.
Right.
So if you take this concept, so if you get a good infection immunity
mm-hmm.
after the disease,
mm-hmm.
the best vaccine that we can make will replicate it. Will replicate the immunity, same as infection immunity. So the immunity you get after a vaccine will be the same as immunity we get after an infection.
Mm-hmm.
But what we have seen till now is like the infection immunity is not good.
What do you mean not good?
It's not good. It doesn't. If you get infected, you get the antibodies. If you have the antibodies, it doesn't mean you're protected.
So just because you get sick, it doesn't mean you're protected from getting that again.
No. I'm sorry. No.
What? Okay.
So when the infection could not confer us a good level of immunity, I don't believe that a vaccine can do that. So this is my view, but still there can be a very strategically designed vaccine with specific neutralize, which can get out the specific protective antibodies. So if we can design that very precise vaccine which can specifically get out that protective antibody and give like multiple boosters and kind of boost up that immunity, the vaccine immunity, maybe there is a chance.
So this is only for COVID-19 only, really?
Yeah, exactly. Like some of the old diseases like polio or diphtheria or whatever, or like the viral disease like polio or measles or mumps or rubella, they got like good vaccines. Just because the infection immunity is good, the vaccine kind of replicates the infection immunity. But COVID doesn't have a good infection immunity, and even influenza doesn't have a good infection immunity. And there is like hepatitis C virus, which is also an RNA virus, which doesn't produce immunity at all. So for these kind of virus, getting a vaccine is really, really tricky. So I'm sorry to be so negative about the vaccine thing, but people like we get a news, mostly like hyped up a media or a business kind of a news, not a scientific report. They say like, we have this vaccine, we have tested on these people, we have shown promising results, blah blah blah, and finally it enters through the trials and they come out like, it shows modest response, it's not that great, so there's nothing so significant available yet. So this is my take.
Yeah.
So when the disease couldn't get a good infection immunity, the vaccine may not give a good vaccine immunity.
So we're pretty much not even close to developing a vaccine, really.
There are like nearly 130 vaccines which are in the trials. I really hope something out of that comes out. At least, like kind of a limited protection, like what we have for influenza. You take the influenza vaccine, it's not gonna like 100% protect you. It has some kind of it protects most of the people who take that. So if we get at least that kind of a vaccine, we'll be like kind of protecting more number of people. And that's like a totally different tangent which I can take this discussion into, but
no, because I feel like that's the main excuse that people who doesn't want to wear masks say is that I don't want to wear a mask because people will get infected either way, and they will develop antibodies to protect them from further transmission of COVID-19. And obviously with what you just said, infection immunity doesn't mean that you won't get sick with the same disease again.
Exactly.
So that's completely invalid now, I guess.
Yeah, the two things which I would like to say here. One, which I already told you, is the infection immunity. The quality of infection immunity is very less, and the duration. So even a person who gets immunity after infection, there are recent studies which say that the duration of the immunity lasts somewhere around 2 or 3 months.
Okay.
So after that, you are
nothing.
Still, you're still at risk. So you can get reinfected. So I mean, this virus is really tricky.
Yeah, what a pain in the ass. Really, because I feel like a lot of people are waiting on vaccines to develop. I think, because a lot of people that I have spoken to doesn't see any other way. They think that, we just have to wait for a vaccine to come out. And
one more point about the vaccines, which it's a bit more scientific. The tangent which I was saying.
Yeah, go ahead.
So it's like the disease as such, the serious disease is not caused by the virus directly. So if you take the people infected with COVID, they can be like asymptomatics, there'll be like mildly symptomatics, and there'll be severe symptomatics. So asymptomatics, there's nothing, they're normal. They have the virus.
Yep. Doesn't show any
no symptoms. The mild symptomatics, they have like fever or a sore throat or maybe some cough. They might have some gastrointestinal disturbances and maybe loss of smell. Things like that. These are the mild symptoms, okay? And maybe some a minor breathing difficulty. And then there are severe symptoms where the breathing difficulty kind of worsens. And they they can't they start to gasp for their breath. So this is the severe symptoms when they need the ventilator support. So these severe symptoms are not directly caused by the virus. The virus kind of starts a cascade of inflammations, and it's the body's own immune response which causes this severe disease.
Right.
Okay. So, if the virus is directly responsible for the severe disease, we can kind of kill it with a medicine and stop the severe disease, or we can use a vaccine and stop the virus and prevent it from causing the severe disease. But the severe disease is because of the human bodies,
pre-existing
or predisposed people. They kind of have an exaggerated immune response.
Right.
The kind of exaggerated, mistargeted kind of immunity which kind of harms our own body. That's why the serious
So it's like an allergic reaction.
Something like that. You can say you're not totally wrong.
My bad. Keep going.
Yeah. So I don't know in what way the vaccine, even if it's totally my guess. Even the vaccine may cause a severe aberrant immune response. So we don't know.
Yeah, because I know that a lot of prefectures in Japan are really struggling to count the number of deaths by coronavirus, because a lot of people, because we don't know if they're dying because of coronavirus or because of some other conditions. So they're trying to set like a rule, like a list of things that defines, okay, this person died from coronavirus. So they're trying to they're struggling to keep a concrete total of who died of coronavirus. I believe it was Kanagawa and Fukuoka and some other prefecture.
Yeah, I can see that. It's a real problem.
Yeah.
You know, it could be an asymptomatic infection and the person would have died of a heart attack. And where do you place that? Is it a COVID-related heart attack or it's an unrelated heart attack and the person had an asymptomatic infection? It's a real problem. It kind of skews up the number.
Yeah.
And especially if the disease becomes very prevalent, we will have these kind of problems. But I would like to point out another problem is that we don't exactly know the prevalence of the disease, like how many people are infected in the community. So there is one feature in biostatistics, the performance of the test. It's called as the positive predictive value. Positive predictive value is the ability of the test to clearly identify the positives, to perfectly identify the positive people. That's called the positive predictive value. So this feature depends upon the prevalence of the disease.
Okay.
Say for example, the United States, they develop a test, test X, and they say like, okay, this is the best test, and this detects like 100% of the people that has a positive predictive value, like sensitivity of 100%, specificity of 95% or whatever. It sounds so good. Okay, but then the positive predictive value of that test depends upon the prevalence. So the prevalence, if the prevalence of the disease is more in the US, the test really works well.
Okay.
And the same test which works so good in the US, if you bring it to Japan where the prevalence is low, it will not work well.
I struggle to understand why.
I mean, everybody struggles to understand this concept. That's why I don't want to explain this in a scientific term. This was the topic that I actually gave the interview in Wall Street Journal.
Okay.
So, and they have a good graphic to show how this positive predictive value depends on prevalence. So, bottom line, you know, if there are more people infected, the test works well.
Right.
If there's less people infected, the test doesn't work that well. We never have an ideal test, you know.
Right.
Nothing is always 100%. So we have the best test, maybe 95 or 96 or 98 but still there is a margin for error. And the margin for error is less when there are more infections, and the margin for error is more when there's less infections.
I would have assumed it was the other way around.
Yeah, it's science.
Wow. I mean, like, I know that you are aware of a lot on the testing of the coronavirus. How, what are the different kinds of tests with the PCR? Like, I know that you can get swabs with a lot of different places, right? You can get it in your nose.
Yeah.
Where in your throat as well. Like, what is the most accurate test that we have seen?
Yeah, this is a good question. It's more into science. So this is exactly what me and my colleague and my professor, three of us, we wrote an article in JAMA.
Yep.
It's about the accuracy of the test based on the time of the disease. You know, if you have on the second day of the disease, which is the best test you can take? On the 7th day of the disease, which is the best test you can? So we drew a graph and we kind of plotted the trend lines of the the test predictions. So which is the best prediction at which point of time? So each test has its own pros and cons. So, and based on the time of onset of illness, the test performance varies. So the PCR is actually good when it's done early. As soon as the symptoms, you get the symptoms, you do the PCR, you have a high chance that it's positive. You know, and the later you go, the PCR's the credibility or to get a good positive result to the PCR kind of fails down, and then you have the antibodies which come up. So there's more chances of antibodies being positive at the later time of the disease. Again, you know, like these tests, finally, you know, people want to know if two things. One, whether they are infectious, they can transmit to other people. The second one is whether we are protected. These are two things which the test should tell. You know, the PCR doesn't confirm
the protection.
No, not protection. The PCR doesn't confirm whether the person is infected. Or infectious.
Oh, okay, yeah.
He's infected, but can he transmit? The PCR can never say that. Because there was a study which has shown that at the 8th day, 8th day after the symptom onset, until the 8th day, the virus is infectious. From the 9th and the 10th and later on, the virus is present, but it's not infectious.
The virus is present, but it's not infectious.
So, not infectious is like the scientists, they take the virus from the people on every day, and they try to grow it inside a cell culture.
Wow, they do that.
Yep. And so they pick the virus on first day, put it onto a cell which mimics the respiratory tract. So you put the virus onto that cell. The first day the virus infects the cell. Second day the virus infects the cell. Fourth day, third day, fourth day, fifth day, sixth, seventh, and 8th day. Until the 8th day, the virus infects the cell. From the 9th day onwards, the virus does not infect the cell. So this most probably means that after the 8th day, from 9th or 10th day, the person who's infected has the virus, but even if he or she coughs it out, the virus is not going to infect another person. This is just an educated guess, you know, because it does not infect the cell culture. It was infecting the cell culture before, but it's not infecting the cell culture now. So there is a high possibility that this person has the virus, but the virus is not infectious after the 9th day. But the PCR can come positive until 4th week. That's like 28 days.
What?
Yeah. So a person can be PCR positive on the 28th day. That doesn't mean the person is infectious. Okay, that's point number one. The second one is the antibodies, the protection. The person may be positive for antibodies, but that doesn't mean the person is protected. You can see?
Wow. So I think it's like, so the 9th day of the from the symptom, they're likely to be asymptomatic at this point, don't you think?
It's not like there's no correlation between the symptoms. The patient may be still coughing, but he might be coughing out the non-infectious viruses.
Because I'm just trying to kind of try to justify the news that we have.
I would have justified it justified it way earlier.
If
I could.
Even for the listeners, if you have heard that if you are asymptomatic, then you have almost no risk of spreading the disease to others. Right?
No, I'm sorry. See, asymptomatic is something, a gray area. Right. It exists, but we just don't know if it exists. Just like the Schrodinger's cat. It's definitely there, but how can we identify it? Can we invest a huge amount of money to go and test everybody to find the asymptomatics? So asymptomatics is a large chunk of population. And it's still a gray area. We just don't know. The transmission happens through asymptomatic
I wonder
people.
how people got to that conclusion that asymptomatic people cannot spread the virus.
I think it was on a miscalculated WHO press conference. There was a spokesperson who said that the asymptomatic might not transmit. They're they're not risky. They kind of said that, but the next day I think they retracted their statement. So I think that caused a lot of confusion among the people.
Definitely. This was on the list of what we wanted to talk about the WHO. We pretty much have no choice other than to get information from experts such as yourself and CDC, WHO, and WHO earlier on when the pandemic appeared, they said you should only wear masks if you're a medical professional and if you're treating patients. But obviously now that's not the case, right? Everybody should wear masks. So I feel like there's some sort of hypocrisy in what the WHO is saying, in what you said as well. So I understand that it's really hard to keep up, but it's very confusing for us as well.
That's what science is all about, right? We're finding new things every day. So when the virus first came out, I remember the WHO said that it's the person-to-person transmission is not possible with this virus. They even said that, and that was maybe in late December or early January. And then the epidemiologists found out the transmission dynamics, and WHO kind of rectified the statement. So there's always this lag time. We make a mistake and then we rectify it. That's how, we get new data and we learn every day.
And I think it's important for the general public to understand that science is like that, because I think that we bash them a lot, whether that be online, wherever. And if I feel like, I know they wouldn't hesitate to put out information, but if they're getting so bashed by putting out information that they found, then in the future, I think that I wouldn't want to put out information if I'm going to be, overridden again. So I think it's important for us to accept that things are going to change with time and with the new research coming out. But I guess
that's what science, science is always I can quote an unrelated but an example, Newton said mass is constant. But Einstein kind of disproved with his E is equal to mc squared, mass can change and it can be converted to energy. So things like this happen. When first we get, based on the knowledge at that point of time, we can make some good decisions, and we get new knowledge, we change our things. So it's always you get the facts and we change the story in science. But most people stick to a story and try to collect facts. That's
and
about
they
their story. And
come back and then they're like, oh, you said this. You lied to us. I'm not going to believe you anymore. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Finally, we are as clueless as you are.
No, it's a very humbling thing being a scientist, I guess. And also, let's take the conversation back a little bit about the masks. I work at the sports club, and a lot of people are wearing masks while they train, right? And I do this myself, and I find it very hard to breathe. Because I do very high intensity lessons, like a group lesson with a lot of adults. And, we do take a lot of procedures that we open the windows, we do alcohol spray, whatever we can do. But my job as an instructor is, wear masks so that people will feel safe. And doing this, I feel super suffocated. Like, I have a headache, I can't breathe, the mask is sticking to my mouth as I breathe in. And I thought at that moment that this is probably like a potentially dangerous thing. Like, what if people are having breathing problems? So I went online to WHO on their Facebook page, and they said, I'm sure it's like, people should not wear masks when exercising, as masks may reduce the ability to breathe comfortably. Sweat can make the mask become wet more quickly, which makes it difficult to breathe and promotes the growth of microorganisms. The important preventative measure during exercise is to maintain physical distance of at least 1 meter from others. What is your take on wearing masks while exercising?
I bet the WHO will change this by next month.
And there's a lot of people commenting on this post. Yeah.
Okay, so there's a lot of things to discuss in this. How can I structure my...
Can you pour me some wine, please? Thank you.
Are you recording this?
Yes. It's fine. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So yeah, cheers.
Cheers.
Okay, coming to exercise and masks. So you said two things. One, it's suffocating. The second one, it's getting wet.
I feel like it's suffocating.
Yeah.
Personally.
So of course, mask kind of suffocates a person. And it also depends upon the type of the mask. There are like the N95 respirator masks, which are really tight fitting, filter out much, and they're like one of the most the safest kind of masks, but they seriously limit the airflow. I mean the air passage.
Right.
Okay, so I don't think that's kind of suitable for the exercise. I think most of the people wear a normal cloth mask or a nylon mask or a surgical mask. So what exactly the mask does is you breathe out inside the mask and you take the next breath. The air that is retained inside the mask goes in again. Okay, so in normal respiration you just breathe in the air rich in oxygen, you breathe out air rich in carbon dioxide. So the air, or we can say the breathe out air with less oxygen. Yeah?
Yes.
So when you have a mask on,
Yeah.
you breathe in air with less oxygen. Okay.
Yeah.
So it kind of makes you suffocating. And if you go for the high intensity workouts, your body needs more oxygen, but the air that you're breathing in is like having less oxygen. So this is more like training in high altitudes.
Right.
You're not doing a normal training, you're doing a Rocky training.
What a masochistic way to think about it.
Yeah, but that's
what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right?
Exactly. So now you get, on the long term, you get more gains. Your
Respiratory
cardiorespiratory function is like, going off the roof.
What if I faint?
Yeah.
But have there been any cases where people fainted while they were exercising?
I remember reading some news, but I don't know if there were some scientific articles about it. But there was a news when people wore N95 masks and they were going on marathons and they kind of dropped down. I think maybe we should cut down the high intensity workout. I mean, limit it. Say, suppose you do 95%, whatever stats you have, you do it just 80%. Maybe tone it down a little bit so that you don't suffocate more. Just give the factor that you're breathing lesser oxygen.
What about these like face shields where you have this plastic thing that comes from your nose down, covering just your mouth, but you can there's still space at the bottom or at the top, wherever your mask is, like this or like that.
Most of the masks, some have some form of a barrier. So they have at least some protective effect. And the more closer fit and more smaller the pore size and more thicker the mask, the lesser the chances the virus gets in. And it's like once you relax on these factors, there's more chances for the virus to go in, but more chance for good breathing.
Right.
Yeah. So I think any kind of mask you wear, there is some kind of protection. Okay. And then the second thing is like you have a mask, you're not going to touch your nose or a mouth. So the second most important way, or maybe the most important way SARS-CoV-2 spreads is through fomites. Fomites is like you touch your nose or you wipe your mouth and then you go and pick your barbell, and after you're set, the other guy comes and picks the barbell and they're going to touch the same place and they're going to touch the nose where the virus goes in. Okay, so when you wear the mask, we are almost reducing, very effectively reducing this fomite mediated transfer. So that's one very important use of the mask in the gym.
Right.
And the second thing is the suffocation part. If you can tone down your intensity a bit, give the allowance for the less amount of oxygen, I think you might get the same output, in the end. And you mentioned about the mask getting wet.
Yeah, microorganism.
Yeah, I don't think the microorganism will grow in the 1 hour or 2 hours of gym that you go, right? So the issue is that the mask get wet. The sweat, the water in the sweat goes and obstructs the pores of the mask. So it becomes like a thin film of water through the mask, obstructing the pores. The air cannot get inside.
Right.
So the wetter the mask, it becomes like wearing a foil wrap rather than a mask. Right? So what can I suggest is like, if the mask gets really wet or sweaty, maybe you could have a extra mask. You can
change it.
Get out of the gym, change it, and place your old mask secure it in a plastic cover or something, a bag, secure it, and then wear your new mask. Use sanitize your hand and get back into the gym. Right. So don't remove the mask inside the gym. So maybe this is a well-educated guess, or the best thing that you can do when the mask gets wet due to sweat.
Right. So the important thing is to be just wearing a mask, pretty much.
Definitely.
Whether that be a surgical mask, a DIY normal fabric mask, it's important to be covering your mouth. Makes sense. Yeah. And
there might there might also be some effect of the electrostatic current existing inside the mask. The people are like kind of studying about it.
Yep.
The electrostatic currents which kind of capture the viruses. Maybe we get some data about this in the future.
Yeah, so we are obviously going to get
which
more
evidence. Which can be the best mask, which has more electrostatic capture of viruses.
Right.
So.
Okay. Well, I'd just like to move on a little bit, but just I will be touching a little bit on what we talked about, with how different countries are affected with COVID, especially with death via coronavirus. And I see that
you want to scare your followers, huh? Death.
So China has reported 3 deaths per million inhabitants, and South Korea and Indonesia is 5 per million. Pakistan is 6 and Japan is 7. I believe this data is from last month. And Vietnam and Cambodia and Mongolia have reported not any confirmed COVID-19 deaths. But Germany, on the other hand, this is from an article, I will link in the description, has had 100 deaths per million inhabitants. The US almost 300, and Britain, Italy, and Spain more than 500. So I can see that the Asian countries, you can see that less people are dying because of this virus. I know the mask can't explain because it's a transmission, but the death. What can be like the reasoning behind this?
I'm glad that I read this article.
Okay.
So I can answer this question. So this article came out in the journal called Gene.
Oh, you were one step ahead of me, Jerry.
Yeah, I think it was published like last week or so, or a couple of weeks maybe.
Actually, yeah.
So people are interested to know what is protecting some people and what is making people susceptible to this disease. Okay, so this article, it says that there is a particular gene. So this same gene can be of 3 different types. So one type of gene is more predominant in some people, some population groups, and that is kind of protective. And the same gene of a second type or the third type, they can go into more serious disease. Okay. So this gene is called as ACE gene, ACE1. The gene is called ACE1, and the 3 types of polymorphisms it can have is like II, ID, and DD.
Okay.
So II is protective. ID and DD, the person who has ID and DD can be having can get a serious disease. So and still, this is this article also has some drawbacks. Maybe it's like maybe 90% it may be true, 10% there is a chance for error for this hypothesis. So we still need to work on this. So maybe we get more studies and prove this confirmedly.
Isn't this ACE gene? Is it like it's not an enzyme? Is it?
It's actually the entry receptor for SARS-CoV-2.
Oh, so it's
ACE is angiotensin converting enzyme.
So it has something to do with sodium and your.
I don't want to go into this. It's something physiologically it maintains your blood pressure.
Yeah.
But in the cells that have this ACE2 receptor, that's the entry receptor of the virus. So scientists have found out this gene, ACE1 gene, and the polymorphisms of this gene determines the susceptibility or resistance to developing serious disease. And this is actually a very new study, and there should be more studies to prove this confirmatively.
And this is mainly a genetic thing.
Yeah, mostly genetic people. There are predisposed people.
Right.
So we don't know if it infects 100 people. We don't know who's going to get the serious disease, who's the unlucky 5%. We never know. I mean, there might be diabetic people, but they might also get an asymptomatic infection. It doesn't mean that you have a diabetes you will get serious disease. They have a risk factor, but it's not a predisposition. The predisposition is something genetic or which we still don't know, but this is one paper which is one of the first papers to identify some genetic predisposition to severe disease.
I'm just wondering for countries such as New Zealand and Australia, they've done very well with controlling the disease and deaths as well. I wonder if, I'm sure that the system was very good. As soon as the virus came in, they pretty much shut down the whole country straight away and, stopped travels.
Exactly. Like genetically, like New Zealanders and Australians, they derived from the UK. So historically, they are the people from the UK came in. Yeah. Right? So genetically, they'll be the same as the other whites of the Western world. But the control that happened in Australia and New Zealand was mostly due to the political and the actions that they made and the people following things, it's more executional process that control the disease there.
I'm sure that Japan and the states can't do the same with what they're doing. I mean, like there's a lot more, it takes a lot more energy and money and a lot more complications to shut down a country, especially for something like the United States and Japan, right?
I think Japan is still doing good.
Yeah.
The only thing that's maybe a small problem is the lockdown is not so strict here. So I think it's again a cultural thing where the constitution doesn't allow the people to force their freedom of movement or something. I'm not sure, but lockdown was never really serious in Japan. There was always some amount of people going out even during the lockdown.
Yeah.
But still, like people wearing masks. The other graphic that I told you, that the countries where the people wore masks, they have less number of cases. So Japan is, people are like really disciplined and wearing masks. I never see people without mask outside. Yeah, so maybe that's one of the main reasons where Japan is much, much better than the US.
Yeah, that is true. Even though there seems to be increasing cases again in Japan with the second wave of the virus after what is this? They cancelled the lockdown. Is that how you say it? They stopped the lockdown. I don't know how to say it, but yeah, they seem to
I
be
told you
rising
earlier
cases.
that the lockdown is just buying time to what to say, buy time for the war. It's never like stopping the war.
Yeah. What if there's not, they may not be a vaccination coming out anytime soon, and
that's my guess.
Yeah, I mean, and medication, we're still not sure. And if all of us getting sick doesn't lead to immunity, then how do we go about approaching this virus? Is it how? I just don't see any other way. Like, are we supposed to be like living like this for a very long time? Because that's a question that I have to ask. I mean, I'm sure everybody is curious.
Yeah,
we really.
You have summed up the angst of the world. How can I answer?
Running into a dead end all the time. Like, where do we go about it? And it's nobody's fault, really. But yeah, so it's hard to blame it on anyone.
No, what I could say is like, get some vaccine, which can, it's not the best, it's not 100% proof. At least, it should show some kind of efficacy, and it can protect like maybe most of the people. I think that's the best thing that we can get. Still, although vaccine, the prospects of a vaccine is really bleak, maybe we should go for that possibility.
Right, vaccinations. Well, we'll leave it to you professionals. But all we pretty much do is bash experts, looking at it from outside. So I know that the last few questions I'm approaching, I know that there's been a lot more updates on the origin of this virus. Right? You said last episode that it came from the wet markets in Wuhan.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of I don't know if it's fake information that the virus seems to have some structure that is made from the lab that might have escaped from the lab. What is your take on this?
Yeah, it's still a conspiracy. We would never know.
But it's definitely not 5G, right?
How can people link a radiation or a
I mean, it's a very interesting
radio waves
thing,
to a virus,
I mean, at least that guy got a lot of exposure from that video, whether that
And
be
he
false
made
or
a mess, you know. So many people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an unnecessary issue. There's so many people talking and protesting about something really unrelated. I mean,
now it's about a completely different thing, right? It's not even about virus anymore.
If 5G is promoting something, there should be a viruses. Is like there are two types of viruses: RNA viruses and DNA viruses. And if it is kind of and coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2 is a coronavirus, right? There are a common cold coronavirus. There are so many other coronaviruses existing among us. There are coronaviruses of cats, the coronaviruses of dogs. So if 5G is kind of potentiating SARS-CoV-2, it should potentiate its related coronavirus. The dog should be dying of 5G. The cat should be dying of 5G. And we get a common cold and we die because we got a 5G.
Yeah.
It's not even worth talking.
Do you think he did it for the exposure, or do you think that he actually believed in that conclusion?
You know what? I can say I'm not sure.
Because he seems to be somewhat of a. He's a professor, right?
I don't know. I didn't follow up this news.
Yeah.
I thought it was like silly. I just brushed it aside because I really don't buy into this argument of.
All right. So, what do you think about the the lab theory of it?
You see, the data that we got is like the wet market did not have any bats. It's like a fish market, right? So maybe it's not the origin. Maybe there was somebody who was infected who visited the wet market and kind of spread it to the people in the wet market. So it was maybe the first cluster, but not the first case. So the first case we still don't know if it came from the bat or it's a laboratory accident. There are some laboratory studies which are going on there. There are but it's more like a conspiracy. We never know that, right? And we haven't got any data specifically pinpointing about the source.
And do you think it's important for us to chase that information of where?
I think at the present time it's not necessary because it's not going to add much info to help us beat the disease. So what if it's a lab accident or if it's from the bat? How is it going to change the outcome from now?
Yeah, that is true. We've got to control the situations that we have occurring now in the society. But I don't know. I don't know.
But I think it's not a good bioweapon. So the bioweapon theory might not be true because for a good for something to be a good bioweapon, somebody should have a good antidote for it. No one has an antidote for this. So if it's a bioweapon, it's a really poorly designed bioweapon.
Maybe North Korea.
Or someone wants everybody dead.
Yeah.
So
I mean, North Korea hasn't had any cases.
No comments.
I am just asking on the interview. I'm sorry.
I don't think they have the science to do this. A shitty bioweapon, yeah, maybe.
Wow. Okay. Well, just want to move into the last topic of what the research that you have been involved in at Yokohama City University. You've been looking at testing of the virus, and then specifically you are looking at the antibody serum antibody, like in your blood, and yeah. So how from the last time we talked, I know you've had a lot of exposure in the science field. You've been on the JAMA, like Journal of American Medical Association, their journal. You've been the front page for it for a while. And can you give me some updates on the testing kit of what? Of this?
The antibody detection, right?
Yes.
So the antibodies for coronavirus, they start appearing in the human body from the second week.
Second week.
Okay, this second week, the first traces of antibodies come in, and by the end of second week and third week, the people reach the antibodies the peak of the antibodies.
Right.
So at this point of time, I told you earlier, by the 8th day, there's no infectious virus, but there is antibodies, and at this point of time, the PCR can also be positive. The antibody can also be positive, and the presence of antibodies can just say that you have had an infection. It can never say that you are protected.
Right.
Okay, so if someone wants to do an antibody test, and if it comes negative, then it's a good result, because they know that they have not been exposed to corona yet and they are susceptible, so they can be more safe.
Wait, I struggle to understand that.
So if
sorry, I'm supposed to cough on my elbow. I realized when I was doing this, I'm like, shit. Okay.
I gotta wear my mask now. Okay.
I struggle to understand that 2 weeks.
So you asked a very scientific question, so I should.
Yeah.
I'm doing my PhD. Okay, so look, the presence of antibodies does not confirm protection from the disease. So, if a person takes an antibody test and it turns out to be negative, then it's something good that can be relied on. The person can be sure that he or she is not exposed to that disease at all. You understand?
But they might have been before the two weeks.
Yeah, that's a chance. So they're either infected recently, very recently, which is not the probability of which is very less. So if an antibody test comes out to be negative, the most possible answer for that is the person is naive.
Right.
He or she is not infected, susceptible. If the antibody test comes positive, it means that the patient has had exposure to the disease. That's all. And we don't know if the patient is protected. So the antibody tests are more important to identify the prevalence of the disease. So that is the main reason why the test has to be done for the community. I mentioned earlier that any tests, the function of any test, or the positive predictive value of a test, the ability of a test to identify the positive cases, depends on the prevalence. More prevalence, better test.
Yeah.
Less prevalence, the same test is bad. So if we do a serological test in a community and identify the prevalence, then we can find out the positive predictive value of our tests. That's the main use of the serological studies.
So it's more for the statistics, really.
Yes. There are some kind of you can order a postal test in the US. A person gets the test done, a postal serological test, without a doctor's interpretation, and the person gets a positive. They'll be really confused. They don't know if they're protected. They don't know if they're infected. They don't know if they're infectious. So it opens a lot of problems there. So I think a PCR and a serological test done together can help for the medical professional when the patient's going to the hospital.
Right.
But at home testing by the person themselves to see if antibodies are present, they don't know if they're protected. So what's the point in doing that antibody test? So there are studies which are trying to find out very specific antibody tests which reflect the presence of immunity, but it's not nothing good has been identified so far.
So what's the period of where the accuracy of the test? Like after 2 weeks of having symptoms, until when is the test accurate?
The antibody test?
Yes.
So the antibody tests best at end of 2 weeks, and then it lasts for up to 6 weeks.
Oh wow!
Yeah, 6 weeks we have antibodies.
Right.
And sometimes even longer. Okay, there are different types of antibodies which I don't want to mention. Some types of antibodies last longer, some last shorter, but up to 5 to 6 weeks, you get 2 to 6 weeks is the period for antibody testing.
Wow.
But the antibodies are there for 6 weeks, and after that the protective antibodies go down. I told that earlier. The protective immunity lasts for only 2 or 3 months or so. So antibody, what I would like to confirm here is an antibody test does not reflect your immune status.
Right. Okay. No, that does make sense, and it might, I don't know, it might confuse some listeners, because I was confused at the very start. I don't know, we might see. But what kind of research are you planning on doing in the future with your lab group?
So right now, we have done a lot of antibody testing, and now we have moved on to find some antivirals, so we are testing different compounds for their efficacy in kind of controlling the virus.
Okay.
So we are trying to see if we can use a very cheap and not dangerous and a very effective compound that can be used on many people, which is not toxic, that can kill the virus. So right now we have remdesivir, that's like the only proven effective agent against the virus, and we are using that only for diagnosed people to stop the disease, to progress it from mild to severe disease or something like that. But there is 80% of the people are asymptomatic, so we cannot give remdesivir to everybody. We don't know, right? So we are trying to figure out or find out some compound which is like non-toxic, like very effective, and it's cheap, and it's like it can be used day to day by people, so that it can control the virus in majority of the population.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we might need, is something that we can do at a mass, because even we developed a new phone application where you can track who's had the virus.
Does that app work on 5G?
Oh, I don't know. You're gonna have to ask Professor something about that. Yeah, so we might need some mass data and very. Do you have any? Last question: do you have any tips for people, for listeners, with how to even approach the virus? Because I know that people are feeling very lost as to like what is going to happen with this coronavirus. I'm sure a lot of people are struggling. I'm sure that people are suffering from a lot of psychological effects from quarantine and stuff like that, and don't know where the hopes are. What can you say to those people? I know it's hard, but
I mean it's like difficult times. Like the entire world is suffering. So I had a lot of plans, so a lot of my plans are cancelled. So if I go and complain it to some other person, they will have the same problem, so everybody is suffering. So what we can think of is like everybody is on the same boat. So if we can talk it out to somebody, we can share our problems. The another thing is like the only effective way that we have found out so far is like social distancing, masks, and stopping this fomites. So that's kind of helping people out, so we can follow that. Say Japan, compare Japan and the US. You can see Japan is faring much better because of the people obeying the rules and wearing masks and social distancing. So that's the only thing that we can do, and we have to wait for like scientists to find out something, you know.
Yeah.
So everybody is in the tough times. So we hope something good is found out. And the worst case scenario, living with coronavirus, maybe there's something called as the Red Queen hypothesis, which says like if there is any new microorganism or any new parasite that comes into a system, it will first start killing many people, and after some time the parasite will realize that if it kills everybody, it cannot live.
Right.
So it will have to coexist. So according to the Red Queen hypothesis, maybe 2 to 5 years the corona's virulence might go down, and it will kind of coexist with us.
Right. Okay. And as you said, it's not one person that is suffering. We're all on the same boat, and we're all on the same team. So there's nothing to be arguing about, and something that we do have to keep cooperating about. I just know the feeling of not knowing where this virus is going and not see the end of the tunnel, you know.
Same here. With doing a PhD, I'm in the same field. I'm having the same field, so.
Yeah. Well, I guess that is up. We're tight on time, so we're going to end the interview here.
Okay, before you end, here's something for you.
Oh,
I checked out your Instagram and saw it was your birthday. Like a couple of days ago.
What is it? I can't open it. Hold on. Can I rip it open?
Maybe you can.
Seems to be like it's a white box for those who are just listening to the audio.
It's a vial of infectious coronavirus.
Oh, no.
And if it transmits through 5G,
yes,
people listening to your podcast may get it.
Oh, oh no, don't say that.
I'm Team Thanos.
Oh, wow. Is this the what's it called again?
I'm not gonna say.
No, this is the famous garden, right? The from India?
Of course, it's from India. It's not a garden.
No, it's like symmetrical.
Yeah, symmetrical, just like coronavirus.
Shit. Oh, shit. What do you call this? Hold on. Damn, I forgot. That's not good.
Okay, that's homework for you.
Wow. Well, okay, listen, so if you want to hear anything from Dr. Jeremiah Stanley, make sure you send me some questions. Maybe we can invite him on a future episode as well. So that might be very interesting.
Yeah, with a cure.
With a cure. All right, thank you so much for being on the show today, Jerry.
Yeah, thank you, Kanan.
Thank you.
Thank you all listening to Barbell Radio.
Barbell Radio.